My name's Robert Peacock. We're farming at Arari Gorge Station, just near Geraldine in the foothills of South Canterbury. With me this evening, I've got Nick Beeby. Nick is the General Manager for Market Development at Beef and Lamb New Zealand. And Nick's been involved with the Taste Pure Nature brand and the Red Meat Origin brand in the story. So, Nick, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the brand?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Robert. And, as Robert said, my name's Nick Beeby. I'm General Manager of the Market Development Program. I've worked in beef and lamb now for a number of years. But for me, one of the most exciting things I've been involved in is the development of Taste Pure Nature, the origin brand in New Zealand's red meat story. One of the things that we have come to understand through the review of the market development program and through a lot of the research that we've done in the market since is there is a genuine need for New Zealand to be telling a consistent story on the world stage about what we can offer the world. So we can talk about our production systems, our natural production systems, the way we farm, and the quality of the meat that we produce. There is a significant opportunity if we all combine and invest and tell a really strong story to the world.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, just on that point there. So how does the brand work with other processors underneath the brand, obviously having their own brands? How does your brand work with their brands?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, and it's one that has been asked a lot. And as we've been working with all the meat companies through this process, they've wanted to understand how they can leverage an origin platform. The analogy that we use is around the cause of the earth. The role of Beef and Lamb New Zealand is to focus on what is consistent, whether it be in the top of the North Island or the bottom of the South Island. And those are the uniqueness of New Zealand, the uniqueness of our approach to farming, and those two things combine to create a unique and natural eating experience. It's then up to the individual producer brands or the meat company brands to go a little bit further and a little bit deeper into some of their own unique attributes which they may have. But what we heard consistently throughout, whether it be a developed market or a developing market, their understanding of New Zealand, their knowledge of New Zealand is relatively weak, and that has predominantly been built up by the 100% Pure Tourism New Zealand campaigns or Lord of the Rings. But their knowledge of New Zealand, consumers' knowledge of New Zealand is weak. Their knowledge of our natural farming systems is pretty much non-existent. And so our role, Beef and Lamb's role, is to really create some awareness and preference for New Zealand meat based on those three core pillars. And then it's up to the individual companies to go further and deeper and to create the why for Silver Fern Farms, or a why for Alliance, or a why for APCO or ANSCO.
Right. Yeah. No, I follow that. Now, I've seen the video, and personally, I think it's great. I think you've obviously done your research and you've found out what appeals to consumers and what they want to see. And as you say, they need to see what New Zealand can offer in the production of sort of natural beef and lamb. So the next question would be, how does it compare to other countries that are doing the same thing? For example, Ireland, they've got their origin green. Yes, I know to some extent they've got grain-fed, but they've got plenty of grass-fed, and their video is all about similar scenes to the New Zealand video. So how do we compare to them, and do you think we still have an edge over countries like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got an edge, and we have tested Taste Pure Nature against some of our key competitors' brands in the marketplace. We probably did it more against the true Aussie market, to be fair, but we have done it to understand how does the work that we're doing, how does that compare to in the market? So what does the consumer think when they see Taste Pure Nature versus what do they see or think when they see True Aussie on a label? And all our research in 6 international markets, we came out on top in every single market, in every single situation. And one of the reasons why is because our story is far more believable than some of our competitors. So when a consumer thinks of Australia, they think of big cities, arid climate, deserts, and the like. And so they don't naturally think grass-fed about Australian product, whereas our story, the recognition that we get, it's far more believable. So yeah, in every single market, our proposition has tested more positively than all of our competitors.
Okay, so now with the launch of this brand and the comments that you've heard from the consumers during your research for it, how do you think that should influence bull breeders in this country and the traits that they select for?
Yeah, but one of the things that we've heard consistently throughout this process, and also on on a recent market visit to North America, was that the grass-fed proposition in terms of consumers really wanting to engage with grass-fed beef and demand grass-fed beef. That's a relatively new phenomenon, and one of the reasons why it's a new phenomenon is people haven't naturally considered grass-fed beef to be great quality. They haven't considered it to be a consistent eating experience. So one of the things that we've heard consistently throughout is the focus on meat quality has to be paramount, and that provides some of the integrity behind Taste Pure Nature. And when we talk about taste, that's an invitation. And when consumers taste our grass-fed beef, we want the eating experience to be absolutely first class the first time and every other time thereafter. So for me, in terms of, I'm not a bull breeder, so I don't know all the ins and outs of what people should be selecting for, but providing a great eating experience and having a consistent quality product throughout the year is incredibly important for the consumer. And I think that's an area that all of New Zealand needs to focus on.
Right. So yeah, you say you don't know all the ins and outs, so you might not be able to answer this. But I mean, at the moment, as a bull breeder, at the moment, we've got marbling is the big thing. We've been told that marbling is the way to select for a good eating experience. Is there anything else that we could be selecting for that eating experience, or even just for consumer satisfaction? I mean, it's not necessarily to do with eating experience, but I know with pigs, decades ago, they found a water holding capacity gene. So, I mean, they could breed pigs that would, when the meat is sitting in the supermarket shelf, it would hold the water better. So it extends its shelf life. So, I mean, are there other traits? I mean, maybe traits that we don't know how to select for yet, but other than marbling, is there something that breeders could be looking at?
Yeah, but I think, and absolutely marbling is one of those big ones, because that's a visual one that people see when they're looking at the meat on display. They can see the marbling, and that's I suppose it's a cue to eating quality. Some of the other ones are definitely around the whiteness of the fat. White fat is generally considered to be of a preference. Colour of the meat. Having a nice reddish colour to the meat is critically important. But then also, I suppose, some of the more intrinsic qualities, such as smell of the product, and tenderness and taste, which I suppose is part of the marketing as well. Those are, I suppose, some of the key points that consumers will look for, or cues that they'll look for as they go past the meat cabinet. And they don't have much time in selecting food. Unless you're in a specialty shop, the consumer will make a choice generally within 3 seconds. So if the product is not looking good and it's not looking appealing to a consumer, then they will walk past that very quickly.
Now, the environment's been talked a lot about, both with farming in New Zealand and potential regulations from within New Zealand, but also trying to match the origin brand and appeal to consumers overseas. So, I mean, with bull breeders, there are some things we can do, like breeding for cows that aren't too big, so they grow fast, but they've got a low mature cow weight. That could reduce pugging and therefore reduce runoff into waterways. But a lot of these traits like that, there's going to be an issue with smaller cows produce smaller calves, so that nothing is for free. So, I mean, how much do you see the advantage of one trait winning over consumers versus the downside of maybe slightly less production, so the quantity versus the quality debate?
Good question. If you look at one of the big consumer trends out there at the moment, and there's this real push towards sustainability. If you think about alternative proteins, why has that started to get a bit of traction in the marketplace? And there are 3 general trends that are behind that. One is around sustainability. The other is around animal health and welfare, and the other one is around their own personal health and well-being. So sustainability is one of the key drivers of consumers at the moment, particularly millennials and some of the more affluent consumers who have got the ability to make some choices because they've got the money to do so. So sustainability, the focus on sustainability is here, I believe, for the long term. People are genuinely concerned about the impact of what they are consuming that has on the environment. So when I think about what's our responsibility in this space, whether it's a bull breeder or anyone else in sheep and beef farming in New Zealand, we've released an environment strategy, and I strongly believe that that's going to be one of the core things which underpins Taste Pure Nature and gives it longevity in the marketplace. Sustainability is crucially important. Some of the questions that we get back from the market are incredibly well educated questions. So large purchasers of New Zealand bred meat understand the impact that sheep and beef farming has on the environment to a very detailed nature. They understand some of the regulations which the New Zealand government is putting in place, and they understand some of the impacts around erosion control and the like that we need to be looking at. So we all have a bit of a responsibility to, I believe, understand the environment strategy and to do things at an on-farm level which help mitigate our impact on the environment. Whether that be reducing calf size or the like to reduce packing. I'm not an expert in those fields, but this is a trend that's not going to go away, and we need to demonstrate to our customers and to our consumers that we are doing our best to mitigate the impact that we do have on the environment.
Yeah. So the New Zealand Hereford Association have recently just started a research project with Lincoln University, and the idea is to put GPS collars onto cows in the hill country and monitor sort of how much they move around and where they go. Work in America has found sort of the valley dwellers versus the roamers to be quite a heritable trait. So cows that roam around more, grazing the sort of the roughage that we want them to graze, are spending up to 30% less time sitting in the valley bottom, which tends to be where the waterways are. So you think that is the sort of thing as bull breeders, we should be looking into? You think that's going to get some purchase with consumers?
Absolutely. And if we think about the supply chain around people that buy New Zealand beef and lamb through to the end consumer, for a major retailer around the world, they want to take away all of the hassle from a consumer. So they want to provide the assurances to the end consumer that the products that they have in their shelves are meeting a certain level of corporate responsibility. So it's those buyers in particular, all this information goes to show the seriousness that the New Zealand industry is looking into how we best address impact on the environment. And to be honest, if I had some of that information a couple of weeks ago in a market visit, I know that it would have resonated really well with some of the people I was speaking to, because they're looking for the innovative solutions to an impact on the environment. Whether it would be relevant to an end consumer or not is probably their level of detail or the time that they'll spend trying to understand that type of detail is probably quite minimal. But to a big, large purchaser of New Zealand beef or lamb, that information is incredibly valuable.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Now, as well as the environment, obviously chemicals and animal welfare are a big issue with consumers. So a lot of sheep breeders have done a lot of work with breeding sheep resistant to facial eczema, reducing animal welfare issues, and other breeders have put effort into breeding sheep that are resistant to internal parasites, trying to reduce the reliance on drenches. So, but very little work done in the cattle world with traits like that. Do you think they need to be? Cattle tend to get away with less drenches, so less chemicals, but they still need some. Do you think we should be putting emphasis on health traits like that?
Absolutely. There's around the world, we talk about food anxiety within beef and lamb and within the Taste Pure Nature. We talk about that there's a great deal of food anxiety that has been created mainly from the industrialization of farming systems around the world, and that is what's driving a lot of concern. People are really wanting to move as far away from an industrialized food system as they can. So I suppose the opportunity for New Zealand is to be the absolute antithesis of that industrialized farming system. So we're not having to have an intervention as much as possible. So being able to breed for those traits is incredibly important. People are searching for a natural food, so the less intervention that cattle or sheep have, from a human being is an absolutely great story to be able to tell a consumer. That's something that they are really interested in.
Yeah. Now, breeding for these traits is a pretty slow process. To get anywhere, you're probably going to need 3 or 4 generations with an average generation interval of, say, 4.5 years. So the title, What's for Dinner in 2028, that's only 10 years away. That's only 2 generations. With some traits, you hardly scratch the surface in that time frame. Now, there are other methods available, such as gene editing. I know some people's understanding of gene work is fairly poor, and you mention the word gene and they'll automatically think of genetically modified, and they'll think that you're sort of throwing in genes from other species into a different species to try and improve it. But gene editing is a fairly, it's not a simple system, but I mean, it is becoming more available. There's no other genes put in. It's just a case of controlling some of the genes that are passed on. So, for example, with the animal welfare, we could, with gene editing, we could potentially affect the lamb's tail length and therefore completely permanently remove the need for tailing lambs. For cattle and deer, potentially there could be diseases. We could create cattle and deer that are resistant to yonis or to a BVD, things like that. First of all, with those health traits, do you think the consumer is ready for that? And what level of explaining and education would it take to get them ready?
This is an area that I think needs a lot more work to really understand what's acceptable in a market sense and what's acceptable, what will a consumer pay a premium for. We have seen an absolute preference for GMO-free products in a recent visit I did into North America. And the level, I suppose one of the concerns that I have is the level of, and you talked about it as well, Robert, is the level of understanding of the consumer in some of these areas is pretty wafer thin. And to have the chance or the ability to have a more detailed conversation around the benefits or the like of gene editing would be a very slow process. They see GMO, they see a headline, and they either accept it or they reject it. So there's much more work that needs to be done at that consumer level to understand their drivers around GMO, and that will be different by country as well. Some countries will be more for forgiving, and some will have a harsher view on these types of things. So I think it's an area that needs a lot more exploration.
Yeah.
Probably didn't answer your question.
No, but I mean, I know where you're coming from. I mean, as a believer in the science, I mean, a question I would ask if a consumer told me they weren't prepared to eat lamb because it had had a simple gene editing process, which meant it didn't have to be tailed and didn't get fly strike. If they couldn't accept that, I would say, well, if you were told you were the carrier of a nasty disease, and as a carrier you won't suffer from it, but there's a 50% chance your progeny will, would you be open to the mind of gene editing for your children to know that they would be clear and to not be a carrier? And I bet a large percentage of them would say yes.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why it's such a fascinating area, is that consumers have this inherent, in some countries they have this inherent distrust of their food system. And when you when you talk about science, they distrust the science behind food systems because of what they're seeing, whether it be the horse gate or the melamine scandals or the like. So they don't necessarily believe that science. If you turn the question around to more of a medical-based question, so you can take this medicine which has had a GMO organism in it, then consumers are far more accepting of that. They believe in the science behind the medical industry. So this is one of those dichotomies of a consumer. They believe in some things and then they distrust others, and that's, I think, why we need to understand that consumer thinking a lot more.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Yeah. So I mean, to farmers in general in New Zealand, is there sort of one message that you would give them if they're wanting to be profitable in the future? Not about production on their farms, but about the end consumer and what the average farmer needs to do to ensure that consumer buys their food over someone else's food. Is there any one thing that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think there is, and it's and I sort of hinted at it before, but it's this idea to be the absolute antithesis of an industrialised food system. And what does that mean? It means around natural. And if you break natural down, what does that look like on a farming system? And that means 100% grass fed. That means no hormone growth promoters. No or limited use of antibiotics. Is just to really make the product as absolutely as natural as possible in the cleanest environment in the world. That's what will differentiate us from all of our competitors, and that's what a consumer is craving. When a consumer, the idea around alternative proteins, we were told this time and time again in North America. People are wanting to eat what they call clean meat, and at the moment they don't feel that there are that many options out there for them. So we have to be the ones that provide that option for them, because this isn't just this is about longevity and having a farming system which is not just going to be profitable today and tomorrow, but can absolutely thrive into the future. Alternative proteins is providing us this massive opportunity to differentiate ourselves from everyone else in the world. And I believe Taste Pure Nature is the start of this journey.
Yeah, and so anything that the bull or ram breeders can do to help genetically, to sort of genetically be more environmentally friendly, to be genetically more resistant to insects or pests, so they don't need chemicals. Anything they can do to help animal welfare, all those things that can be done at a genetic level are all going to help the brand.
Absolutely, eating quality and being prepared to have a longer term aspiration of where the bull breeding sector wants to be, because people genuinely understand that no one's perfect at day one, but they believe if you set a vision for the future and you can show progress along the way, people believe in that. And so very much what we're doing with Taste Pure Nature is setting an aspiration for where we believe our sector needs to be, and consumers will buy into that. We know that if they can see that we are delivering on that journey.
Right.
And we need farmers. We need all farmers to buy into Taste Pure Nature as well. We need consumer needs to trust us, and farmers need to buy into it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Nick. Unless you got any other pearls of wisdom,
No, that was good.
That'll do. Thank you very much.